Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Patrons video today that I'm making for Sun as part of their custom monthly music review. And if we switch over to here, we got ourselves a track on the screen. It is on Spotify. It is titled Safe Landing by MimikBanka. MimikBanka apparently. So we're going to listen through it from start till finish. And we're going to hear what we think. Let's go. So spooky almost immediately, isn't it? Really peppy with the bass though, and the kind of ghostly pads. Straight into the vocals. I mean, like, it's just such an interesting 16th note groove on the drums. The guitar as well, the steel strumming meshes well. It's an interesting contrast to the tones on those synths. With wonderful overlapping vocal harmonies. And you know that snare fill, that snare fill built up like that, it had a bit of a crescendo to it. That's the value of dynamic range in a mix, allowing there to be life in it. And that's a clarinet, isn't it? Great alternate lead there. Really soulful. Or it could be a sax. I mean, I think that's a saxophone got in the mix at this point. Just with the breathiness of it, you know? And see, that's a fantastic point to change into a different motif, a different concept there. We've had a fair bit of the verse and chorus backing, and now it's like, hey, what else can we do? Let's try this. I dig that. Similar instrumentation, but... oh. It's a wonderful song to listen to on a sleepy evening, you know what I mean? Polyrhythms here. I mean, like, can you hear the wishy-washy kind of texture in the background there? I think it's a lovely thing to have as a re-entry to a chorus line after an instrumental section or an interlude, as it shows that something has potentially changed within the situation due to those voices in the back. I mean, those cymbal shimmers at the end are tremendous. There's a lot that I appreciate about the song. I think it's a really solid instrumental performance. The woodwinds are nice and refreshing. They're not a thing I typically get within a lot of the tracks I listen to here. Not nearly as much of a focus on woodwinds as they were within the 70s and 80s, for example, but along with, traditional ensembles nowadays. But I appreciate it. We're going to talk about that more in the conclusion. But until then, we've got lyrics. If I just make them nice and big here. Kindly provided by Ellen, thank you for that. So, desire to land in a safe place will be timid in a gentle place. I would like to sing to strangers. Okay, so basically we're trying to find a safe place so that we can sing to strangers. I met you down, drowned in the clear spring of your eyes. Okay, but I love you, it's like the wind in the valley, but I love you although you'll never stay in my arms. Desire to land and stay in place. It's cool. Open my wings that I never tired, looking for light in the night sky, and those unnecessary sad imaginations I learned to hide them. It's a little bit cryptic, but I think we've got it. And welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named, what was it again? It's an act named MimikBanka. I'm hoping I said that correctly in the intro. It's a track named Safe Landing. So I think that this track is about someone who is looking for like a safe place to be able to do their things, spread their wings, be an adult, be a human being. They've moved from somewhere into this new arena and they met another person who they're talking about getting lost in the spring of their eyes, for example. They got separated by a hug. I'm not necessarily sure what that means. I'm wondering if it's something to do with they had physical contact or something like that and things became awkward or something like that. That they love the person and they want to have something with them, but I think it's complicated. And effectively, they're trying to avoid thinking of the worst case scenario and trying to, put aside their fears to try and work forwards for a brighter future. That's my take on it. Let me know if it's completely scuffed. I'm sure we'll be able to figure that out together. But in the meantime, I think that's what the lyrics are about. The vocals that sang them were gorgeous. There was just this main singer for a lot of it. We had backing vocals on the sides there that were like a call and response to the main ones, but ultimately it was just a situation where I think we were typically trying to tell a story in a nice, calm and chilled out way. We weren't trying to sort of overdo it emotively or passionately. It was meant to be one of those kind of chilled, stoic, easy to listen to vibes and moods within this kind of pseudo-acoustic stuff. And I enjoy that. I think that it has a place in music industry today. I mean, it clearly does. There's quite a bit of love, like 5-figure plays for each of these tracks, and I think that that's well deserved. They're a great band that overall I was very happy with their efforts. The vocals were great. There wasn't a whole lot of wild vocal technique and ornamentation and massive sort of trills or legato passages. It was sort of more of a sung kind of chanted kind of almost indie aesthetic there that I think is nonetheless still valid. And not overdoing vocal runs and stuff like that can often be a great thing in the sense that it forces the listener, or you enjoy how it sounds, but also it's easier to take in the story. It's not so much about the spectacle, if that makes sense. I think that in addition to this, the vocals are tremendously well done. The lyrics are great, and you got that sort of combination or connection between the two. So it's the track itself that we want to talk about. The song had verses and choruses and like an interlude section which was mostly instruments like the woodwinds. There was like a clarinet solo or something like that there, guitars and basses and drums and sort of synthy textures at the start as well. We established the motif earlier on, we had the vocals come in and kind of iterate the story on top. There were repeated sections there again for the hook lines, which allowed it to get stuck in your head, but they weren't too sort of over-eager, you know, they weren't trying to shove it down your throat, which is always refreshing. And you know, after that interlude section, we then went back into the chorus line where we kind of iterated upon it with like whooshy sounds, almost like the wind's passing us by as we were flying, because they were talking about like wings in that final section there. So it kind of makes me think, hey, we're flying through the air. That is the sound of the wind as we pass by. So ultimately, I think that was satisfying. It was nice, potentially, if that's correct, to have that there. The guitar riffs with the steel string chords strummed like that, with a dun 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 dun, almost like 6/8, if that makes sense. But we're fantastic. That's all we needed from the strings, just a mid-range, a little bit of brightness and sheen there. There might have been some arpeggios and some melodic or broken chord bits occasionally. And that's basically what I got from it. The bass line nice and low, as per what a bass usually is. Supporting the root notes really nicely. There was a bit of sassiness though. There was some interesting sort of 8th or 16th note grooves there, which were very fluent and showed a great sense of control over the instrument. There was enough room in the arrangement with the relative mellowness of a lot of the other instrumental parts there in that section for the bass to sort of spin its wheels a little bit in a way that's positive, and I appreciate that. It's not quite a bass solo, but it's one of the more energetic bass riffs I've heard in quite a while, outside of a lot of the stuff that's in the not in the mainstream. In fact, it's the antithesis of a lot of stuff in the mainstream. It was just great to have an active, fun, sort of explorative bass line. So that's cool. It's great, and it was well performed as well, which is the icing on the cake. The drums were fantastic. I appreciate the 8th and 16th note grooves there, typically exploring the cymbals there, a fair bit of snare and sort of kick work, but it was very soft and soothing, and it was never too much. It was never too overplayed. We're typically pocketing for a lot of it. And it was just this fantastic performance. I was very supportive of the rest of the elements in the mix. The synths that we had there were nice, reasonably bright in the mid to high range there without being too shrill. They accented some of the notes and the chord progressions, the arpeggios in a way which is very positive and warm and soothing. And they weren't necessarily lead synths, so they were more of a kind of not a foundational thing, but like a support act to the vocals and a lot of the guitarists and stuff that they were trying as well. And then there was just the woodwind parts, the clarinets or the saxophones. I'm not sure how many different brass or woodwind instruments they had, but it sounded like they had a few, or at least there are a few takes of each of them. And the reason that I appreciate that is because it can be so typical to just not really have them used at all. Woodwinds are fantastic. They have a certain different kind of texture and timbre to a lot of other sort of string-based or percussive-based stuff. Even like a clarinet not being like a saxophone, which is often used as like a solo instrument or whatever in like certain tracks, as like a sometimes thing. It was nice to have that feature throughout the entirety of the piece because it allowed us to sort of be more sort of aware and ready for that solo section where it came. And it was well phrased. It wasn't too over the top. It was respectful to the initial vocal melodies, key scales, and signatures and stuff. And it was just great. I have no complaints about it whatsoever. I thought it was really well handled. It was very respectful of the rest of the arrangement as well. It didn't try to sort of steal the limelight too much. And a lot of those kind of woodwinds and the kind of soft breathing parts there, that came together really nicely for that interlude part with the guitar, bass, and drums as well. So it was very satisfying when we got to that 3 or 4 minute mark there for things to go into that final chorus. There's a bit of change there, a different chord progression in that part as well. I liked that we had a different chord progression or a different concept when we got to the instrumental section. I'm not saying that we have had like the same chord progression through the entirety of the track before that. It's just more that there was a similar kind of aesthetic with a lot of the ingredients there, and when the vocals came away, it was almost like we were like, okay, all the other backing musicians have their time to shine as a collective, as in a total amalgamation of it. There were some interesting polyrhythms as well performed in that part. There was something going either in triplets or like going in like 4/4, something like that. They were like a counter meter, a polymeter potentially, but ultimately there was a satisfying amount of dynamic range. There was some interesting sort of crescendo snare-ish bits there, and there was not a note out of place with the performance. The theme itself, when I take into effect the types of chords there, the melodies played, the beats performed, etc., when I look at it, again, it's a very sleepy sounding thing. It kind of sounds like the woodwinds are gently calling out to you. It's like you're being invited to partake in a nice sort of really sleepy sounding, almost dreamy aesthetic there. It's like dream pop or something like that. I really adore the way that they have tried to make it, again, a pleasing experience for the listener that tries to approach the concepts they're discussing in a way where it's not affronting and it's not overdone or generic. It's, like, to be fair, there's like, I think, just before we move on to the studio recording, mixing, mastering, there was a lack of harsh textures or anything within this track, and that can sometimes be a detriment, but it's almost like even at 5 minutes, I think they knew to have that interlude or instrumental part there simply to make this track more memorable. It's almost like it was better off for that longer amount of time, because I'm not necessarily sure if the first 3 minutes by itself would have had the necessary oomph to make you kind of remember it. It was having the bigger meal, but having that extra bit of context at the end before that last chorus that kind of really sort of rounded it out and made it feel complete. But yeah, it sounds like we're talking about things. Again, it's like a nighttime conversation. There's a lot of tracks that I've heard recently which sound like nighttime conversations. Like there's artists or musicians who are aware of the fact that things are quite overwhelming for a lot of people at the moment, and are simply trying to provide an alternative in the form of music as some sort of therapeutic device. And I think it works. The chords were complex, but not affronting. It was a very peaceful track, could I say. And I think the studio recording, mixing and mastering worked well with that as well. Like it wasn't in your face. Things were mixed and mastered in a way where they were nicely glued together. There was dynamic range, but things didn't get too quiet or too loud. Things were nicely niched in the frequency spectrum there, no resonant frequencies, nice and wide. Nice and wide in the stereo field. Things surrounded you in the headphones, but not to an extent where it was kind of like alienating or like, again, too sort of verbose. It was more just like a comfy, warm blanket is what this track sounded like to me. And with the vocals just being sung really well, whether it was, again, the backings on the side, which are nice and bright in the mid-range there and just articulated some of the notes of the triads really well, with the mains performing similar vocal melodies without overextending, because the vocals showed great technique there, great head and chest voice and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. They were a fantastic singer. The track was still nice and low without pumping. Limiting bus compression was handled. It's still commercial grade. But effectively, this is my review of this track from an act named MimikBanka, titled Safe Landing, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show them some love via their various social medias and their Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever thought crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next SB Patrons video. Spiderhands out.